If I can have your attention, please. Thank you very much for coming and joining us on this relatively foggy Viennese winter day for a discussion on our third event on open journalism. As you probably are aware, our first meeting started last year to look into the process of how journalism is changing through not so new media anymore. I think anybody who talks about the internet being relatively new is quite wrong, since the internet and the new media have now been around for over 20 years. But what we wanted at the first event is to see what are we talking about when we talk about the changes in journalism. On the second meeting in September of last year, we looked at human rights and legal implications of open journalism. And today we would like to open the discussion on the role of internet intermediaries in open journalism. We have a very interesting couple of panels, but of course the most important thing is, after the introductions, we would like you to engage in a discussion and debate. So it's an open discussion. We have quite a bit of time for discussion, so I would like you to encourage you to participate and join in. First of all, I would like to ask the OSCE representative on freedom of the media, Dunja Mijatović, to formally open this event with a few words. So, Dunja, please.
Thank you, Frane. Good morning, Excellencies, dear participants, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor and pleasure to see so many of you again joining my office in discussing issues that are so important for journalism nowadays. As Frane already said, this is web streamed. It is an open meeting about open journalism, so we should all engage and we should all participate and try to find some answers on this particularly important and challenging topic for the future of journalism, for the future of media. How do we embrace so-called newcomers, and how do we find a way not to restrict those voices that are joining the discussion, the audience that is for the first time so active and not passive. This is the third meeting, as you know. I'm also very glad that we have our usual suspects present, but also many new faces, many new experts, and several also side events where we will discuss issues of concern. This meeting was launched almost 2 years ago, and the aim of this project, I think it's important to remember, it is only happening because of generous contribution of several participating states. It is also to reflect on changes in the practice of journalism, particularly the role of digital technologies playing in this era, and I'm really grateful to several governments for recognizing the importance of this topic to be on the agenda of the Office of the Representative on Freedom of the Media. The first expert meeting took place in May 2014. These seminal discussions helped to define the issues to be dealt with, specifically regarding changes in the profession, methods to support new forms of journalism, the presence of new actors, applicability of international standards on freedom of expression and freedom of the media, reliability of truthfulness, respect for ethical rules, and economic implications against others. So not very easy topics, not very simple answers, and not very simple questions we had to pose and we had to discuss. We had some great experts joining us in this endeavor, and some people really working in the field trying to answer all these questions. So it, in a way, helped us define future meetings and topics that are relevant for the future of journalism. We also heard about challenges and problems journalists are having around the world when trying to engage online. We also mentioned the issue of safety, but also the issues that are very much related, or you can call them technical issues when it comes to journalism. Online gathering of information, comments of the viewers, and all these other issues that are extremely important. After that meeting, we had a series of recommendations to participating states where we distributed it, referring to the need not to try, and I emphasize here, not to try to define journalism, to provide new media actors with the protection and privileges in the past only granted to traditional media, as well as to improve media and internet literacy in order for the public to have a better understanding of the new environment. The second meeting was held in September 2014, and it focused on legal issues, particularly on how traditional and well-established media legal statuses should be applied or reinterpreted to protect innovation and media plurality within the context of open journalism. The basic motto of the meeting was the acknowledgement of the fact that while technological changes mean that journalism and media are irreversibly changing, our basic human rights remain the same, and our rights, offline and online, are the same. No matter how much many states are trying to say that that's not a fact. This simple fact is also present in a landmark resolution of the UN Human Rights Council on Internet freedom, and this is something we should not forget. We should not put aside papers, recommendations, commitments, and all those wonderful words on paper that our states are adopting at the different international fora. We need to see how these words that sound so grandiose on paper will be implemented in practice, and how these words will not affect negatively journalism, but foster it, open it, and allow freedom. Freedom to talk, freedom to express ourselves, and freedom to say even things some people do not like. Recommendations released after the meeting stressed the need to ensure that the Internet remains an open platform for the free flow of information and ideas, and that any proposals to regulate it fully respect and promote freedom of expression and freedom of the media. It outlined the absence of a need to create new rules to deal with illegal or harmful content, and giving special preference to self-regulatory mechanisms. Last but not least, I also recommended that the new media actors should also enjoy some, if not all, of the privileges that were in the past only granted to traditional journalists. Can I have some water? Now we are about to start the discussion of the third meeting happening now, which will focus on a very specific but also very important area. And it was recognized by many of you during the first two meetings, and not only here under the OSCE roof, but also other international organizations, the role of intermediaries and how we can start discussion about this important topic under the topic of open journalism. The issue of intermediaries has been present in all our discussions before, but we never went into the focus, into the core problem that many journalists and media actors are in a way seeing while doing or trying to perform their job. It is almost impossible to make a proper assessment of the changes in journalism and in the relationship between journalists and the public without a proper acknowledgement of the presence and activities of a diverse series of actors, including search engines, micro-blogging sites, and social media platforms. I'm really glad that we have many important players here today, so we can also hear from the colleagues trying to deal with these issues. They have become one of the most preeminent tools for the consumption of media content and engagement by citizens. It is therefore necessary to devote a whole meeting, including two different panels that I already mentioned, to analyze how intermediaries can affect the way content is distributed and what is the relationship between intermediaries, public authorities, and the adequate protection of human rights. For these discussions, we have here today a group of wonderful experts from several regions of the OSCE. Once again, I would like to thank all of you for being here, as well as the ambassadors and delegates from participating states. I believe today's meeting will facilitate a better understanding of the challenges we are all facing in the area of freedom of expression and freedom of the media. And I truly hope that this project will continue in the future, because it means a lot to the ones we are trying to protect. It means a lot, and it changes many aspects of journalism when we talk to the civil society in many regions of the OSCE. I recently came back from Tajikistan, where I met with colleagues from all 5 Central Asian states, plus Mongolia. And sometimes we think that the problems exist only here in Europe, but we should not forget our colleagues there, our colleagues in South Caucasus, our colleagues in many other parts of the region facing enormous problems that are related to safety, but also to be able to express themselves freely and engage with public. What states are mainly doing, unfortunately, is to propose restrictions. Not all, of course, but I will not use this forum to name the states. I think they always recognize themselves. And this is something that I think is important for this office to pay attention in the future. Not to forget how the voice of this office is important to the civil society. It matters for the governments, of course, but the main issue is to support free voices. And it is in the commitments of this organization, even though lately I see a lot of pushing under the carpet when we see these problems, but I think it's important to keep talking about it, no matter how difficult it is. At the end, I would name the countries, but the countries that help this project happened, and those are governments of Sweden, Serbia, and the Czech Republic, for their generous contribution and for all of us to be able to gather here today. With this, I'll end, and of course, I'll be more than happy to talk with any of you who wish to talk to me about topics that are important to media freedom of all OSCE states or just your particular states. And with this, I give floor back to Frane. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just to know that, as you can see by the cameras here, the event is web streamed live. If you want to participate also in the discussion online, hashtag we are using is open journalism, so one word, hashtag open journalism. Please also join in on that. Before handing the floor to the moderator, or the first moderator, I would like to first ask to play out a video clip that was sent to us by David Kay, UN Special Rapporteur on Promotion and Protection of the Right to Freedom of Opinion and Expression. David unfortunately could not join us here today in Vienna, so he asked if he can send us his contribution. So to hand the floor to David first.
It's a great pleasure to address you, although I would much prefer to be there with you in Vienna for your meeting of the Open Journalism Project. I'm especially pleased to follow Dunja Mijatovic, who has been a real source of expertise and really of inspiration for me as I have taken on my role as Special Rapporteur for the UN over the last 18 months or so. Dunja has put freedom of the media and more generally freedom of expression at the center of the OSCE, and I think she's done so in a way that will be a legacy for many, many years to come. Now I wanted to say just a couple of points or raise a couple of questions that I think are at the heart of the question around intermediaries as you're discussing them today. And these are not questions that I'm raising that will be new to anybody in the room, but I do hope they provide a sense of where I'm heading as I, at the end of my comments here, provide a little bit of information about our newest upcoming project. The two questions that I see are, one, what standards should the ICT sector be using to regulate content? What standards should the ICT sector use to regulate their own activities with or in repressive states? This one question, I think, is of particular importance as we see, and as everybody has recognized over recent years, that so much of what we once considered to be public space, public forum, and what users consider to be public space is privately owned. What standards should apply within that space, particularly to the extent that governments are not regulating in that space? And that leads to the second question, and that is, what obligations do states owe various stakeholders when it comes to expression and the ICT sector? What obligations do states owe ICT players to promote and protect freedom of expression? Within the ICT sector, how can states promote and protect the expression, the freedom of expression, the freedom of opinion of users who are using the platforms? These two questions, putting the onus in a way on both the corporate sector and the government sector to promote and protect freedom of expression, to me are essential. And they're very much driving my next project, which I want to mention briefly and then conclude. And I mention it in order to encourage all of you who are participating in this meeting today to provide your input. So we are launching a project that focuses on corporate responsibility in the ICT sector. But again, it's these two separate issues, the corporate responsibility and the government responsibility to promote and protect freedom of expression. We're starting this project immediately with a report to the Human Rights Council that we will publish in the spring and present to the Human Rights Council in June, that is essentially a mapping project that asks three sets of questions. First, when we talk about the ICT sector and freedom of expression, what specific industries are we talking about? Second, what legal issues are the key ones that we should be focusing on at the international, the UN level? And third, what existing principles that have been promoted and established by different stakeholders, which of those principles should be relevant at the UN or international level? We'll be presenting this, what we're calling a mapping report, to the Human Rights Council, as I said, in the spring, but we're encouraging all to provide input to us at this point. And you can find all of the information about our public call for submissions at the OHCHR website or at freedex.org. And I would encourage everybody in the room to consider providing us with information. The project, we hope, will lead to a set of principles that ultimately could be adopted at the UN level to address the kinds of questions that you're addressing today. But over the years that lead up to that point, we'll be doing a number of things. We will be doing in-depth, specific thematic studies and different legal issues that arise within the ICT sector and freedom of expression. We will be conducting company visits, and we will ask companies for access in order to address questions such as what standards they apply, how they apply them, what processes are involved in applying various standards for regulating content, for regulating activities in different jurisdictions, and so forth. And then finally, our hope is that we end up in a place where we can, the Human Rights Council, a set of agreed upon principles that the Council itself might adopt and that might attract widespread adherence around the world. So I'll conclude with that. Again, I wish you the best of luck in your day's discussions. Again, I wish that I could be there with you, and I look forward to engaging with you both through our public call for submissions as well as through the various meetings at the regional and national levels that I'm sure that we will hold over the coming years. Thank you very much.
So David gave us a very nice introduction into the two topics and the two issues that we would like to also discuss today. And as you can see, this topic and this issue is of a broader and wider interest than just here at the OSCE. It's something that's preoccupying all of us throughout, I would say, the whole world. So without further ado, I would like to invite the moderator of the first session, Yaman Akdeniz, Professor of Law at Istanbul Bilgi University, to take the floor and introduce the first panel.
We should have one more speaker.
But she'll be arriving anytime because she's doing it.
Right, okay. She's going to join us in a minute. Okay. I think like most of you, I have a cold as well, so apologies.